Just hours ago, President Trump touched down in Honolulu, Hawaii, making a stopover as part of his 12-day, 5-country trip to Asia. Aside from the issue of immigration, President Trump was largely elected on his promise to renegotiate trade deals that have really hurt American workers. As such, one of the most important jobs in the Trump administration, and especially on this presidential tour of Asia, is the U.S. Trade Representative. The man who currently holds that job is Ambassador Robert Lighthizer. He sat down with me for a rare interview yesterday at the White House. Ambassador Lighthizer, great to see you. I know you love giving media interviews, so thank you so much for spending time. You are off to Asia. It's a big trip. It's the longest trip the president has ever taken since he was inaugurated. What's the goal?
This is a very important trip. It has two elements. One is security, geopolitics, and the other is trade and economic issues. I'm obviously concerned about the second. We're going to Japan, to Korea, to China, to Vietnam, and then the Philippines, and that would be $65 billion deficit, $27 billion deficit, $350 billion deficit, $32 billion deficits, and in the Philippines we don't have a lot of trade with. We have essentially balanced trade on a small volume. So there are a lot of economic issues, a lot of trade issues. The biggest one, of course, is China.
Purely on the China front, what can we do other than impose tariffs to stop the Chinese cheating on international trade, whether it's dumping, whether it's subsidies of major corporations selling products for under market value?
Well, I mean, we have to have a coordinated effort within the administration, and I think we do. First of all, the geopolitics is somebody else's problem. I'm going to focus very much on working men and women and farmers. That's what I was hired to do, and that's what I'm going to worry about. China has an industrial policy that involves a lot of subsidies, a lot of dumping, a lot of forced technology transfer, all these sorts of things. So what have we done? We have prosecuted cases on anti-dumping, on countervailing duty. The president has initiated a case on so-called 301, which looks at the intellectual property transfer.
Which they call a Cold War era relic. The, quote, free traders criticize you and the administration for using this outdated federal statute to go after China.
Look, it's a very effective tool. We'll use the WTO when we can. The president's willing to act unilaterally when he has to. And when we say it's cold-rolled air, look at Ronald Reagan used it, and he used it very effectively, and it made a big difference for our trade policy, and a lot of people benefited from it. So we'll use every tool we can as long as it's fair and consistent with law.
China has something called their 2025 project. It's their focus to dominate every major industry, from 3D printing to rare earth to heavy manufacturing, tool manufacturing. It's really ambitious. Is it just kind of pie-in-the-sky thinking, or is there a real opportunity for China to dominate all those industries?
It's a very, very serious challenge, not just to us, but to Europe, Japan, and the global trading system. And basically, it's very focused. It is the areas you talked about, but also aerospace, on new energy vehicles. I mean, they want to be on top of all the high-tech, all the cutting-edge economic areas, and it's smart for them to do it. I mean, they're doing something that's in their interest and that they should do. We should be in a position where we defend ourselves with the same amount of vigor, and I think that this president will do that. But that is a genuine threat. It's a combination of massive subsidies, of closed markets, and a focus on technology transfer. So it's a very, very serious threat in all of those areas. And if you go through the parts of our economy that are affected by it, it's hard to find any kind of a tech part that's not potentially adversely affected by this.
There's a split in this party. There has been for a long time. But before Trump came along, it was Buchanan and Ross Perot and Mike Huckabee and Rick Santorum, the blue-collar conservatives. Do you have any doubt in your mind about Trump winning because of his position in part on immigration and in part on trade? Would he have won Pennsylvania or Ohio, do you think, if he didn't have that focus on the American workers?
No, I think he focused on what we used to call Reagan Democrats, and now they're really Trump Democrats. They're working men and women, and they're farmers. I think he focused on them. I think he is very empathetic. This is a man who goes out there and sees what is happening to these people and in their communities. He cares very deeply. Personally, I think it was a major effect. One of the 2 or 3 probably most important things, and I think he believes that, and I think he's going to deliver on his promises. We're going to change this paradigm.
Businesses say we need the market certainty. We need the certainty or we can't operate. And you say?
What they're really saying is we need the certainty so that we can invest in Mexico.
So we can we want certainty in outsourcing.
We want certainty to outsource. And my reaction to that is that's not my job. My job is trying to create manufacturing jobs in America and to put upward pressure on people's wages. These people in America, many of them, these workers, haven't had a raise in 10 years. And they deserve a break. And the last thing we should be doing would be ensuring, guaranteeing, subsidizing investments in another market. It makes no sense. And by the way, in the case of automobiles, 80% of those cars, 80% are shipped back to America.
So wait, so they're manufactured in Mexico, shipped here with no tariff?
Shipped here with no tariff. That's precise. That's the idea.
Are you stunned at this point that after the president wins, after Donald Trump wins in November of last year, almost a year ago, we are still seeing the same arguments made in the Wall Street Journal, by the Chamber of Commerce, by the Cato Institute, that he is acting in a protectionist manner, that he's trying to put up walls to trade, walls to people, and the free market, the free flow of goods and services is going to be hurt, and American consumers are going to be hurt the more aggressively we pursue this trade enforcement. They're still making those arguments.
Well, I mean, if you say, am I surprised? No. I mean, those arguments have worked very well for them for years and years and years and years and years. Here's the reality. The reality is the president wants efficient markets. The president wants open, fair, reciprocal, balanced trade. But we don't have it. Everybody knows that. So the question is, what do you do? Do you buy a rabbit's foot, cross your fingers, make the sign of the cross? Do you do that? Or do you have a strategy where you're going to use every tool America has to ensure that our workers and our farmers get a fair shake?
So when they say you're going to start a trade war, you say?
We're not starting a trade war at all. We have exactly the same objective as the Chamber of Commerce. Exactly the same objective. The question is, how do we get there? We've tried it their way. We've tried it their way for 25 years. Since at least 1995, we've tried it their way. All I am saying is, let's try a different route for a little bit. The result of their way, I would suggest, is a $750 billion goods deficit and an overall goods and services deficit of $500 billion. I mean, these are staggering numbers. We ought to try something else. I think we're going to end up with more efficiency. We're going to end up with more global wealth. It's going to be fine for businesses, but most importantly, it's going to be fine for American workers and American farmers who need a break. And part of this whole trade idea, this whole public contract, is that we give fair trade in return for open markets. And that's what all the workers bought into. Until now, they really haven't got it. But with this president, I think they're going to get it.
Tell me about the president's leadership style on this particular issue.
On at least my area, he knows the stuff. And if you look at his life for 30 years, you go back, and he'll say exactly the same thing he said 30 years ago, 20 years ago, 15 years ago. It's remarkable.
Ambassador Lighthizer, thank you so much for spending some time.
It was my pleasure.